All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. Well, I want to share this. This sent shiver is not the right word, but like it sent a tingling shiver all the way down my body. Just the absolutely awesome revelation, epiphany when I read these results. So I want to share it with everybody else. It 100% confirms what I've been saying in my suspicions. It's just now verified by the AI, even. So, like I've been saying a lot lately, hence my book, When the End Days Would Occur, like I've been teaching for nearly 10 years now on YouTube, I've always said that 2023, 2024 will be the end of days. And if it's not then, it'll be in the years following, leading up to 2026, 2027. I'm not going to get into all the reasons why, but it's in all my videos. It's been for years. It's in my book. And when 2023 rolled around, we of course saw the attack on Israel starting on October 7th. That continued over through 2024 and now into 2025. So, long story short, either this year, next year, or in 2027 is going to be the arrival of the messianic forces, if you want to call it that, the arrival of God in whatever way he will be arriving, or the arrival of Messiah himself, the judgment day. All of this is going to be transpiring very, very soon. And one of the prophecies I've mentioned a lot recently in videos for, I don't know, the last half a year or just over, is in the prophecy of Ezekiel. It might have even been more than half a year, but that doesn't matter. The prophecy of Ezekiel and Zechariah, where Ezekiel says specifically that once in the future, once Israel has been reborn and the people have ingathered back there and they're dwelling in the lands, it is at that time that these certain nations, and Ezekiel specifies which nations. One of them is Iran. The others are what are now Islamic nations. But Ezekiel says that these nations will band together as a group known as Gog Magog, and they will go and attack Israel. They will be surrounding Israel. Zechariah is describing the same event as Ezekiel. But altogether, it's saying that these nations would exist in the future at the time when Israel has been reborn, and that they would oppose Israel, they surround it, they would attack it, and it all comes to an end when they launch a further attack, but upon Jerusalem. And this, according to the prophecies, is what instigates the arrival. Well, it precedes the actual arrival of God Himself, if you want to call it that. And I've often argued that if you were to sit down and calculate it would be impossible for a human to do it, right? So I got the AI, a computer, to do it for me here just to verify it. But like I said, the odds mathematically would be impossible for the prophecy of Ezekiel, and likewise in similar fashion these other prophecies that speak about and corroborate the one same thing. It's impossible that somebody made up that prophecy and it's just bogus. It's not really from God. It's not godly wisdom. I've always argued that it's impossible for someone to just make up a fake prophecy like we see in those prophecies and for it to come true over such a long period of time into such specifics like are given in the prophecies. The odds, if you were to calculate it, would just be astronomically impossible, which would show you that it must be true. Okay. And like I said, that's what I always figured and reasoned in my mind, but I got the computer, the AI, to solve it for me at pretty much the speed of light. And I asked it what would be the mathematical odds. So I'll read the specific question that I asked it so you can see for yourself. But I've also got another question, which I'll start with first, just to build up to that, about Iran in biblical prophecies and so forth. It's interesting that the AI is now recognizing. It didn't automatically recognize it like this in times. I've quizzed it before. But because of the world events that are transpiring right now, even the AI can recognize that these biblical prophecies are being fulfilled about Iran. And welcome, man. Hopefully you like this video, because like I said at the start, this one sent shivers down my spine when I read the AI results. So anyways, I'll read those two questions, but I just want to mention now, right, like the video title says, what the AI concluded, okay, is the odds of that prophecy being actually just bogus, like somebody just made it up and it's nonsense, and the odds of that prophecy actually being fulfilled, coincidentally, would be 1 in 50 billion. Okay? So, like I claimed, the odds would be astronomically impossible. So, let's just put 1 in 50 billion into context. We're talking about the arrival of the end days, right? So, if each year, let's just say there was a chance in each calendar year that the end days may come, which is kind of a funny, um, oversimplified, but technically, accurate statement to make, because in some year it's going to happen. You know what I mean? But if you had one chance for the end of days to actually arrive in each calendar given year, just to give everybody the idea, the understanding of how great the odds are, 1 in 50 billion, the Earth, even according to science, is only about 5 billion years old. Okay? 5 billion, right? So if we're talking about if each calendar year you have a chance of the end days actually occurring, we would have to go back before the start of the universe, according to science's dating, right? The universe is like 10 to 15 billion years old. Like, you couldn't even go far enough back on the timeline. That's how great a number 50 billion is. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to start here on my first question that I asked it. What biblical prophecies mention Persia in the end days, right? I was hoping for it to just bring up some other verses that I wasn't aware of or hadn't really focused on, but what it did present here is well worth reading, because it's a great build up to what the big reveal I'm about to do, right? So this is what the AI said. Here's an analysis of biblical prophecies mentioning Persia, which is modern day Iran, in the end times. So I'll just read this pretty quick. It's only about 1 page long. So, historical context. It says the area corresponding to modern day Iran historically was known as Persia or Elam, and it's mentioned in several biblical prophecies related to the end times. These prophecies suggest a role for Iran in future events, particularly concerning its relationship with Israel. End times prophecies. Historically, Elam was conquered by Babylon in 596 BC, but later Persia under Cyrus the Great gained control of the area. The Medo-Persian Empire then conquered Babylon in 539 BC, fulfilling Isaiah 21:2. This occurred during, and that's interesting that even the AI, which is neutral, if anything, you could say it's atheist, you know what I mean? It doesn't believe in God. It actually says it fulfilled Isaiah 21:2. So it recognizes that's one other thing that got fulfilled. It says that this occurred during the time of Daniel, who later resided in Persia. The book of Esther and the first part of Nehemiah are also set in Persia. So the AI is just giving a little bit of background of Persia in the Bible. So anyways, going on, current events and prophetic significance. It says, Iran's involvement in the end times is primarily linked to the Battle of Gog and Magog, like I've been saying, which is believed to occur during the first half of the tribulation period. Ezekiel 38:5 specifically identifies Persia as an ally of Magog. This coalition is predicted to attack Israel, but God will intervene and destroy the invading forces. So, like I've said many times recently, or for a while now, we're on this final domino. I mean, I say it so many times, I'm tired of repeating myself. I think people probably get irritated hearing me repeat myself, but it's the final domino, and that domino has already been tipped over. We're just waiting for that very last domino to go plunk, and that's the arrival of God, which will be coming, right? But it says this coalition, Gog Magog, is predicted to attack Israel, but God will intervene and destroy the invading forces. Other nations involved in this coalition may include, and that's based on what nations Ezekiel names, as I've claimed before, Sudan, Turkey, and Libya. Next, different perspectives. Recent events such as Israel's Rising Lion operation targeting Iranian nuclear facilities have prompted discussions about the alignment of these events with biblical prophecy. While some interpret, and that to me is pretty incredible that even the AI is mentioning this here. Like, AI is very, very hardcore. It doesn't believe in aliens, UFOs, spiritual, religious stuff. It's got nothing to do with that, because it goes by, what's verified science, what's verified here and there, right? And it will call you out if you try to claim something that's not verifiably true, right? So for me, it's significant. It's even mentioning biblical prophecy and certain things being fulfilled to start with. But anyways, it says, while some interpret these events as a foreshadowing of end time scenarios, it's crucial to note that the regathering of Israel in 1948 is considered a significant prophetic sign. Like I've said, the rise of anti Semitism and increasing isolation of Israel are also seen as indicators. Conclusion, let's see. The Bible does mention Persia, Iran in end times prophecies, particularly in relation to the Battle of Gog and Magog. While current events in the Middle East are drawing attention, it's important to approach these interpretations with caution and focus on spiritual preparedness and understanding the core message of the gospel. So, pretty interesting that even the AI is starting to say stuff that sounds religious. You know what I mean? But that's just a nice little background. So, even the AI is acknowledging that, yeah, the world events right now are what Ezekiel spoke about, right? So here's where you get to the crux of this video, right? So I asked the AI, what are the mathematical probability odds that the prophecy of Ezekiel, if bogus and not genuine prophecy, would be able to accurately predict that thousands of years later, in our current year 2025, that Persia, Iran, and other Islamic nations would attack the reborn Israel? So I put in all those specific, like factoids as variables, as conditions, right? So the AI at the speed of light, using its, quantum mind power and mathematics, was able to give a rough estimation on what the probability odds would be, right? So I'll just read the whole result here, right? So the question asks for the mathematical probability odds that the prophecy of Ezekiel, if bogus, could accurately predict the future event involving Persia, which is Iran, and other Islamic nations attacking a reborn Israel in 2025. Well, I didn't say what happened in 2025, but nonetheless, this is a complex question that touches upon theological interpretation, geopolitical analysis, and the nature of probability when applied to historical and prophetic claims. Understanding the prophecy of Ezekiel. To assess the probability of such a prophecy being accurate by chance, several elements need to be considered. One, the key elements for probabilistic analysis. The prophecy in question is primarily found in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, often referred to as the Gog-Magog prophecy. In these chapters, Ezekiel describes a future invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations led by Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. The nations listed as allies of Gog include Persia, which is modern-day Iran, Cush, which is Ethiopia or Sudan, Put, which is Libya, Gomer, which is possibly parts of modern Turkey, and Beth Togarmah, which again likely is modern Turkey. The prophecy states that this invasion will occur when Israel is dwelling securely, gathered from many nations, and living in unwalled villages. Next, challenges in applying mathematical probability. Point 1. The reborn Israel. The modern state of Israel was established in 1948, fulfilling a long-held aspiration for a Jewish homeland after nearly 2 millennia of diaspora, 2,000 years. This reestablishment is often seen by proponents of the prophecy as a prerequisite for its fulfillment, as it is stated in Ezekiel. It says only after, the land is reborn and the people go back there will Gog Magog do this, right? Point 2. Identification of Persia. The identification of Persia and Ezekiel with modern-day Iran is widely accepted by scholars and commentators given the historical continuity of the name and geographical region. Point 3, identification of other Islamic nations. That's just the way I termed it in the question. The other nations mentioned in the prophecy, Cush, Put, Gomer, Beth, Togarmah, are generally identified with modern-day countries that are predominantly Muslim, such as Sudan, Libya, and parts of Turkey. Point 4, nature of the attack. The prophecy describes a large-scale military invasion with the intent to plunder and seize spoil. Point 5, the timing, latter days. Ezekiel states the event will occur in the latter days, or in the distant future, which is interpreted by many as a time preceding or during the end times. Applying strict mathematical probability to prophetic claims is inherently difficult for several reasons. Step-by-step probabilistic consideration, hypothetical. It says subjectivity of interpretation. The identification of modern nations with ancient names is subject to interpretation. While I think in this case, there's not really much room. I mean, there are the geographical areas, and all of those geographical areas are predominantly Muslim, and they are opposing Israel, right? But anyways, subjectivity of interpretation. The identification of modern nations with ancient names is subject to interpretation. While Persia is relatively straightforward, others like Magog, Meshech, and Tubal are debated among scholars. Because there's no argument over who put Cush, Togarma, Beth Togarma, and what was the other one? All of those are established geographical locations, and like I said, those locations exist today, so those aren't arguable. Gog and Magog are being used in a loose sense as names to represent these 5 nations gathered together against Israel. Gog, Magog. Meshech and Tubal are other lands, but we don't need to get into this, right? But I just wanted to point out the 3 that it mentions as being debated among scholars are not the ones Ezekiel names in the list. Okay, it's just Magog, Meshech, and Tubal, right? But going on, so dynamic geopolitical landscape. Geopolitical alliances and conflicts are constantly shifting. Predicting specific alliances thousands of years in advance is highly improbable by random chance. Definition of accuracy. What constitutes accurate prediction? Is it the exact fulfillment of every detail or a general alignment of events? So again, this is just the subsection. The AI is categorized as step-by-step probabilistic consideration, right? Next, lack of sample space. Probability theory requires a defined sample space of possible outcomes. For a unique historical event like the establishment of Israel and subsequent geopolitical alignments, defining a comprehensive sample space of all historical trajectories is impossible. The God factor. From a theological perspective, if the prophecy is genuine, its fulfillment is attributed to divine foreknowledge, not random chance. This is what the crux of my question was about. What are the odds if it was a bogus prophecy? It's not from God, and it just coincidentally by chance came true, right? That was the whole point of my question. So what the AI is saying here is that from a theological perspective, if the prophecy is genuine, if its fulfillment is attributed to divine foreknowledge, not random chance. If it's bogus, then any apparent fulfillment is coincidental or a result of human interpretation fitting events to the text. So it continues. Let's consider the probability of each major component occurring independently by chance. Despite the challenges, we can attempt a hypothetical breakdown to illustrate the extreme unlikelihood of such a specific prediction occurring by chance, assuming the prophecy is bogus. Number 1, probability of a reborn Israel in the latter days. For nearly 2,000 years, there was no sovereign Jewish state in the land of Israel. The probability of its reestablishment in the 20th century, i.e. 1948, after such a long diaspora, such a long period of time, I'm not saying that's what diaspora means, right? But anyways, I'm not doing side lessons here. It says the probability of its reestablishment in the 20th century after such a long diaspora was historically very low. Okay, so it's starting off from that point there. Just on that one point, the fact that Israel would be reborn is very, very, where is it? The probability is very low, right? So it's probably not going to happen, right? It could happen by coincidence, right? But that's just one point, right? But even still, it acknowledges that for Israel to be reborn after 2,000 years, as I said, would happen. The odds of that happening, we're starting off with that right there. Anyways, next it says, let's assign a highly speculative probability. If we consider the entire span of human history and the countless ethnic groups, the reestablishment of a specific ancient nation after millennia of dispersion is an extremely rare event. Hypothetical P1. Probability of Israel being reborn in the 20th century. It gives, and again, these are rough odds it's giving, right? But it's basing everything. It's got a basis for everything. So it's giving 1 in 1,000, a very generous estimate, it says, as it was unprecedented. Number 2, probability of Persia, Iran, existing as a significant regional power and being hostile to Israel, i.e. after the 2,000-year period. It says, while Persia has had a long history, its specific geopolitical stance towards a reborn Israel in the 21st century is not a given in terms of if this was a bogus prophecy that coincidentally came true. It says empires rise and fall, like I've always said, and alliances shift. Hypothetical P2. Probability of Iran being a significant power and hostile to Israel in 2025, 1 in 100, it says, considering the vast number of possible geopolitical configurations over millennia. Point 3. Probability of other specific Islamic nations, Kush, Sudan, Put, Libya, Gomer, Turkey, Beth Togarmah, Turkey, being allied with Iran against Israel. It says the specific alignment of these nations, some of which have had complex relationships with each other and with Israel, is highly variable. Hypothetical P3. Probability of this specific coalition forming against Israel in 2025, it gives an odd of 1 in 500, considering the numerous possible alliances and conflicts. Point number 4. Probability of Israel dwelling securely and unwalled at the time of the attack. It says Israel has been in a state of conflict for much of its modern existence. The idea of it dwelling securely and unwalled is a specific condition. Hypothetical P4. It says probability of Israel being in this specific state of perceived security in 2025, it gives us 1 in 50 odds. Now continuing, it goes on with the next subchapter in calculating the combined hypothetical probability. So it says the probability of the attack being a large-scale military invasion aimed at plunder. It says while conflicts are common, the specific nature and intent of the attack as described, large-scale invasion with plunder, is a particular scenario. Hypothetical P5, probability of such a specific type of attack, it gives the odds of only 1 in 20. So now it does some maths. The total of those P's, like hypothetical P1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so P total equals P1 times P2 times P3 times P4 times P5. If we assume these events are independent, which they are not entirely in reality, but for a purely mathematical exercise of chance, we treat them as such, the combined probability will be the product of individual probabilities. So here's some more maths. The P total equals, it says, 1 in 1,000 times 1 in 100 times 1 in 500 times 1 in 50 times 1 in 20. P total equals it's a mouthful, but I'll just read it out. So start again. P total equals 1 in 1,000 times 1 in 100 times 1 in 500 times 1 in 1 times 1 in 50 times 1 in 20. P to did it just repeat itself here? It looks like it just repeated the equation a second time by accident. Yeah, okay. So that it's just repeated that equation. So here we go. But continuing, so P total equals 1 in 100,000 times 500 times 1,000. So it's rounding it down. That's what it's doing. So P total equals 1 in 50 million times 1,000. So the P total final rounding is 1 in 50 billion. So the P would be probability. So next subchapter, caveats and conclusion. It says, therefore, the mathematical probability odds that the prophecy of Ezekiel, if it was bogus and not genuine prophecy, would be able to accurately predict that thousands of years later in our current year, 2025, that Persia, Iran, and other, Persia, which is Iran, and other Islamic nations would attack the reborn Israel, based on these highly speculative and illustrative independent probabilities, would be approximately 1 in 50 billion. It says the probabilities assigned to individual events are subjective and lack empirical basis. The events are not truly independent. Geopolitical factors influence each other. The interpretation of ancient texts and their modern equivalents is not universally agreed upon. I mean, if you ask the AI any theological question, it will always give an answer like that. There's always many interpretations of these verses. There's always many differing interpretations in Christianity. And it always says that because the AI is always unbiased and universal and neutral in its approach, right? But going on, it says, it is crucial to reiterate that this calculation is a highly speculative and illustrative exercise to demonstrate the extreme unlikelihood of such a specific set of circumstances aligning by pure chance over millennia. It does not constitute a rigorous scientific probability assessment because, from a purely mathematical standpoint, if one assumes the prophecy is bogus and any apparent fulfillment is due to random chance, the odds of such a detailed and specific prediction aligning with future geopolitical realities thousands of years later are astronomically low. This is why proponents of the prophecy view its apparent fulfillment as evidence of divine inspiration, while skeptics attribute any perceived accuracy to coincidence. That's why my whole point of my question was, what would be the odds? Even if it's a rough estimate, what would be a fair, calculation as to what would be the odds of it being a bogus prophecy that coincidentally has come true, right? So, anyways, again, this is why proponents of the prophecy view its apparent fulfillment as evidence of divine inspiration, like myself, while skeptics attribute any perceived accuracy to coincidence, broad interpretation, or self-fulfilling prophecy, which is where beliefs influence actions. The current geopolitical climate in 2025, with Iran's significant regional influence, its stated animosity towards Israel, and the involvement of various regional actors, does indeed bear a resemblance to some aspects of the Ezekiel prophecy, leading to ongoing discussion and interpretation among various groups. So that's its conclusion there. But those are the odds that it gave, right? Now, that's some pretty incredible stuff. Pretty incredible stuff. So yeah, all I can say, folks, is get ready, reform from your sins, because I mean, there you go. If you didn't believe me, believe unbiased, neutral AI with a mind quicker. It's at the speed of light. We could never think that quickly, even if we were smart enough to be able to analyze everything that it analyzes. We wouldn't be able to do it that fast. And nobody's that smart, anyways. It takes somebody a lifetime, or it take ages to do a super study, like the type of thing you could ask it. It just does it at the speed of light, right? So common sense tells you that the prophecies have been fulfilled and are being fulfilled and are almost finished. That's common sense, right? The prophecies themselves, when you apply them to what's taking place in the world in the past and in the current, that shows you as well. So observation and common sense. And now we even got the unbiased quantum AI supporting this, right? The odds of all of these things being fulfilled is astronomically high. Even if its calculation, like it says, is approximate, even if it's not 1 in 50 billion, even if it was 1 in 5 billion, even if it was 1 in 1 billion, you know what I mean? But let's just use common sense. There's no way that somebody over 2,000 years ago, because the book of Ezekiel is at least 300 BC, 200 BC at the latest, right? But it may have genuinely been written by Ezekiel in 500 or 600 or whatever BC, right? But it's still, my point is, even for skeptics, the book that we have is over 2,000 years old, verified. And there's no way that someone back then could just make up all that stuff and it all just happened to come true after thousands of years with all those specific conditions, right? The odds are astronomical. Okay, they're astronomical. So it sent shivers down my spine when I read its math result of 1 in 50 billion, because that just tells me that, like, if you're, even as a believer, we all get skeptical at times, right? And you'll ask yourself stuff, or you doubt stuff, and you quiz yourself, you quiz reality, you quiz certain things about God. Everybody does that at times, to each their own, right? And what better way to verify? I mean, how else could you put aside your personal bias? What better way? Get the neutral opinion of AI at quantum speed. You know what I mean? With its quantum, capable mind of just quantum computing, processing ability, and to ask that and get its unbiased opinion. That's a better opinion than any person, because people have bias, right? It's definitely going to happen. You know what I mean? So even if you're a skeptic, an outright skeptic, or a believer, but sometimes you wonder or you feel skeptical, if you wanted a reason to, full on believe, like, this is a pretty darn good reason. Okay, it's pretty darn good reason. I mean, like I've said and warned, like, all it would take is for them to launch an attack on Jerusalem. And as I've said before, we're not talking about the Bible, this giant book, and it said one thing that's going to happen in the future, like a prediction, and it looks like that one thing's coming true. No, like I've said many times before, there's about 24. Okay, I list them off in one of my videos if it's still up, right? But there is about 25, if not like 26. Let's just say 24 to be conservative. 24 prophecies given in the Bible, written thousands of years ago, that say that certain things, certain historical events would take place, significant, world changing, world altering, or nation altering events, like significant things would take place in the future, right? And of those 25 prophecies, every single one of them came true. Okay. And a lot of those prophecies, not all, but a lot of them are given time, like periods of time, like the numbers and the maths and the algebra is literally supplied by God in those verses, in the prophecies themselves, like I cover in my book. In my book, The 7 Pillars of Scriptural Proof, each one of the 7 is a prophecy in the Bible about the end time. Well, a prophecy in the Bible, most of which are about the end times, but all these prophecies in the Bible contain a length of time, a number, a set time, and markers when to take it from and when the period ends, right? So there's 7 right there, and of the 25, there could even be more. But my point is we don't just have one random prophecy saying, "Oh, I think this will happen in the future." Oh, look, it came true. We're talking about 24, at least 24 prophecies that all came true, significant things. And as you build those dominoes up against each other, it becomes more, just logic and common sense tells you this. You might guess one thing taking place in the future. Like I could just guess and write a fake book and say, "Oh, I predict that China will collapse, like China will fall, in the future." And maybe in the future, China will. Are people going to be hooting and hollering, "Oh, he's a prophet," right? Not off one thing like that. But we're talking about 25 specific things that were to take place, significant things, and they've all come true. Each one that you add to that first one, the odds of it coming true, if it was just bogus, become greater, right? So you could guess one thing coming true if it's general enough, or even a specific thing, a hyper specific thing. You could just make one hyper specific prediction, and given a couple thousand years, maybe it would happen, right? But combine that with the next prophecy, right? And then the next one. So you're not just having to guess correctly one thing, one historical event. You're having to guess numerous and most of them connected historical events. That's impossible for someone to just guess, right? That's why I was interested to know what would be the mathematical odds for all of these things coming true. And the amazing thing is, I only asked the AI about the Ezekiel prophecy. I didn't even mention Zechariah, even though Zechariah is talking about the same thing. And I didn't mention any of the other 25. All I would have to do is put in the prophecy of Daniel, like I cover in the book here, one of the prominent chapters. If I put that into the equation, it would be astronomical. I mean, it's already astronomical at 1 in 50 billion odds of it occurring. It would probably be like 1 in 200 billion. You know what I mean? It would just become like exponentially, if that's the right term. It just becomes more and more impossible with each extra domino that you put down. And when you're talking about each domino having probability factors, if that's the right term, like specific events, like uncanny, unique events, that makes it harder for them to be coincidentally fulfilled, right? The more unique and specific it is, right, adds to the overall impossibility of it coming true by coincidence, right? And when you're throwing in prophecies, keeping that in mind, but throwing in prophecies like these 7 that contain specified lengths of time, that just makes it even more specific, because we're not just saying that, oh, Israel will be reborn one day. That's somewhat broad, you could say, right? But when you're applying the prophecy of Daniel, for example, if I were to do that and apply that into the equation, we've got specific time periods highlighting the years that this would be taking place, right? The rebirth of Israel after 1948, and all these other things, the Dome of the Rock and the Temple Mount. If you were to apply that into the equation, it would probably be 1 in some, like, couple 100 billion, or maybe 1 in a trillion. I mean, it would just get so exponentially greater, the odds of it being impossible, right? So you really just need common sense at this point here. Whether you're a full skeptic or a believer who's sometimes skeptical, this is all the logical evidence you need. Like, if you wanted a good reason, a verified reason to believe that we are in the end of times, this is it right here, okay? The only way you could turn around from my message here today and say, well, I still kind of doubt, would be if you believe that the prophecy of Ezekiel was bogus, and all the other ones are bogus, but they just coincidentally got all this stuff right. Well, that was the purpose of my video here. The odds of that actually happening are impossible. If we, like I said at the very, very start, in case you came in late, if you put it in context of there, if you put it in context of this, our planet Earth, science says, is about 5 billion years old. The universe is like 10 or 15 billion years old, roughly speaking, right? If each calendar given year, you are to say arbitrarily, there is a chance that the end of days will come, which, by the way, technically is a fair logical statement to make, because you're just allotting, it could happen in any given year. Okay, so all fair to say, but if you give it the possibility of occurring, the end days occurring in any given year, there aren't enough years in the age of the planet Earth to account for the impossibility of these mathematical odds. We only have 5 billion years to go with. And you might think, okay, well, let's stretch back to the age of the universe, according to science, 10, 15 billion or whatever it is. It's still not enough time. So if you're looking at it like that, if each calendar year that physically transpires from the dawn of the universe, if in each calendar year there is the logical chance that the end of days may come, we would need to live through 3 cycles, over 3 cycles. I mean, well over, if you were to factor in the other prophecies. But at least, just going by Ezekiel's prophecy, 3 15 billion year cycles of the birth of the universe to our current point now, 3 times in triplicate, for it to finally reach the 1 in 50 billion odds that this hyper-specific prophecy could come true and the end of days would arrive in that calendar year. That's how much time would be needed. That's how impossible these odds are. Okay? That is impossible. Okay? Absolutely impossible. So if you wanted a darn good reason to believe that the Messiah is coming, this is it right here. Okay? And as of yesterday, the world events were different. As of today, as of last night and today, depending where you live in the world, things got a lot more heated. We're now at the point, because I've been keeping abreast of all this, while I slept last night, apparently Trump came out and said that he would back Israel on, attacking Iran further. And apparently it happened while I was asleep, but Trump said something like the U.S. might attack Iran. Okay. And then there were talks in the news as the day went by. Oh, could this lead to nuclear war? And Russia made some comment allegedly. I'm not getting into things and misquoting people, right? But all this developed just overnight. Okay. And as of this moment now, I just see, as of a few hours ago, it was reported that leader in Iran said, nope, we're not going to agree to ceasefire or what's the other term? Surrender. We're not going to do it. Like Trump had given him the offer to surrender, and then, the attacks would be stopped, and then you'd work towards peace. Iran said, no, we're not going to do that. Right. So Trump is saying today, like you see the clips in the news, he's like, well, I gave him the chance to do that. The time limit passed. They made it clear they don't want to surrender. They don't want to back down. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. So that means they moved to that America and Israel be moving to phase 2 and continuing. They gave them the offer to surrender and to stop, but they didn't. So there we go. So right now, in terms of world events, we're in that situation where if you put yourself in Iran's shoes, being as proud as they are, they've said they want to destroy Israel. They've already just recently threatened to go after American and any other allies of Israel because of what's developing right now, right? I doubt, but they could launch missiles or even secret missiles, like nuclear ones that the rest of the world doesn't know they have. They could launch them at America. I've heard rumors, I can't remember what the source was, so I'll just call it rumors for now, but it wasn't from little nutcases on the internet, that they've considered striking the east coast of America, right, if America attacks Iran. Right. So all of that development occurred overnight. So right now we're in the situation that Israel and America, unless by some other divine or political intervention, they're going to continue doing what they were doing and, to win that battle against Iran. And Iran, being as proud as it is, will not want to back down or look weak in front of anybody. So they've already made the threats to destroy Israel and attack any allies of Israel. So, I mean, at this point here, it's not reaching to say that Iran is probably going to lash out violently. You know what I mean? Because it's being gripped. You know what I mean? It's going to thrash and lash about violently in desperation. And it's at a time like that where they could pull out some serious weaponry from their back pocket that other people may not have known about. And I kind of think that's why Israel was wiping out Iran's nuclear development weaponry and all that. Maybe they had intelligence that Iran was going to use nukes and whatever, right? That's a speculation, but we're at that point now, folks. News agencies in the last few days were even having talks like, could this result in a world war? Could it result in a nuclear war? Allegedly, I'll have to check the source again, but allegedly, Russia's, it could be true or not. I don't know, just throwing it out there, but I'm mentioning in case it was verified and from the news. But allegedly, Russia made a comment like, "Oh, if you guys go and attack," because they have ties with Iran in whatever way, right? But allegedly, I read that they have ties with Israel too, so it's an awkward situation for Russia. But if what I heard was correct, depending on the source, Russia allegedly said that if everybody goes and attacks Iran, it could lead to a nuclear situation, right? They didn't like specify what. They didn't say who would be doing any nuclear launching. But it's kind of scary to see things like that being said. A lot of people always have this idea and concept that the world leaders are smart enough to avoid a nuclear war, right? That everybody thinks, oh, we don't want that. Surely the leaders and the militaries of the world don't want that, and they're not going to do it. Even the crazy leaders, they're not going to go, sacrifice the environment of the planet and this and that for people. But let me just shatter everybody's bubble there, right? The reality is, number one, that nuclear bombs are not, they're powerful where they hit, but they're not as widespread devastation as people might think. Anybody can go look up one of those simulator programs or apps. They're online and everything. How big the blast zone is, the energy shockwave zone is, the radiation spread zone is. The worst thing is the radiation spread, right? That's the worst thing. That is an inevitable thing. But the blast zones and the shockwave zones are only, I'm not quoting it, but they're not very big. They're only like a couple miles across or so. They're not as big as you imagine while you're growing up. You think, oh, a nuclear bomb drops, like a whole country disappears. No, it would take, depending on the country, it would take dozens or maybe even hundreds of nuclear bombs to level a country, right? So even if the world nations who have nuclear weapons all started launching all their nuclear weapons, I mean, I don't know what the sum total of all the nuclear weapons is on Earth, but I mean, my point is, it would take hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons to cause the physical widespread devastation that everybody imagines happens in a nuclear war. If you're in the blast zone, it's different. Yeah, you're definitely in the worst epicenter. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just speaking in general on the whole planet. But like I said, the more nukes that are launched, the more of the radiation spread you get, which is inevitable, and that spreads around the world. That's an inevitable problem, right? So two things that I wanted to mention. That's the first one, right? It would take a lot of nukes to do the type of devastation everybody imagines. However, even if just one nuke was dropped on a place, it's devastating for that place, and it would be a terrible time in the pages of history. My point number two is, ironically, the only nation on the planet, and this, I'm not saying this because I don't like America. I support America, but I'm just saying, the only nation on the planet that has actually used a nuclear weapon against people is America, ironically, right? So everybody out there thinking, oh, the world leaders are so smart, they're not going to go launch and start a nuclear war. They're not going to drop nuclear bombs on people. They would never do that. Well, of all the nations in the world to do it, the smartest nation, one of the upper echelon nations that everybody looks up to, are the only ones who have used a nuclear weapon. And they dropped it on innocent people in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Okay? They wiped out whatever it was. I'm not quoting the numbers exactly. 100,000 people. Terrible. The people that got blown up are innocent people. They didn't magically gather all the army into that one spot and drop the bomb on them. Like, lots of innocent people got vaporized, nuked, and all of that there. America did it. So you can't tell me or tell yourself that, oh, the world leaders wouldn't do this. I mean, we're talking about America, a one of the civilized, so-called civilized nations, if you want to use those terms. What about nations that aren't that civilized, who are less civil, such as Iran? Iran, I read in the news, everybody knows this type of thing. They do public executions. I think it was they executed something like, I'm not quoting the number, I think I read it was like 600 people were executed in Iran last year over the head covering law, right? That's pretty bad. Uh, so you compare that to America, you were talking about civility, you know what I mean? If America, one of the most civilized nations, has already used a nuclear bomb on people, you could definitely assume that the less civilized, more hostile, aggressive, and less civil nations will most certainly not hesitate to drop a nuke on somebody if they get irritated. So why anybody would think that, oh, it could not result in a nuclear war? Nobody wants that. It'll never happen. Yes, it could happen. It could very easily happen. Okay, people have this thing in their mind that, oh, they won't launch one nuclear missile because it's going to ruin the whole planet. That's not what's going to happen. If Iran, God forbid, launches a nuclear weapon, okay, or somebody else launches a nuclear weapon on behalf of Iran, just throwing that out there. But if they did launch a nuclear weapon and God forbid it hits Israel somewhere, it's not going to wipe out the whole of Israel. It might wipe out a large city, perhaps, or a city, but that's about it. That's the blast zone, and the shockwave zone would spread out a bit further, right? Like when you had that meteor hit up in Chelyabinsk, Russia, or whatever it was, for miles, people's windows were shattering, buildings were shaking, and people's eardrums exploded, right? That's a blast wave radius. So you'd have that as well, but it wouldn't even devastate the whole of Israel. Like Iran could very easily launch a nuclear weapon. They could and it wouldn't be a big, and bear with me here, but you understand what I'm saying if you're following me. It wouldn't be like a huge major thing like we think it is. What would be a huge major thing is if they launch lots of nuclear bombs. And for example, if they launch a cluster of nuclear bombs at Israel, right? And launch nuclear missiles at other nations. That would be a major problem scenario because even though the whole planet's still going to be fine, you're going to have, yes, the radiation, like I said, right? But you're going to have multiple different nations being destroyed, right? Not whole nations, but you see my point, right? So it is entirely possible. My point in all of that rambling is that it's entirely possible that Iran will launch a nuclear missile against Israel. All the stuff they're launching so far isn't working, but 90% of it is blocked by the Iron Dome. Only about 10% get in. If Iran had a nuclear program, they were developing nuclear power and potentially nuclear weaponry. We had all those USSR nuclear weapons that went missing after one of the wars. This is a widely known thing, and nobody knows where they went. It's alleged they were sold on the black market. So outside of their own nuclear program, they might have ready-to-use nuclear weapons obtained from the black market. So Iran has the motive, the personality, the character, and the pride to go launch a nuclear weapon. They're cornered. They're defenseless. There's no way they can beat Israel. They see all these other nations coming in, to support Israel. They're going to lash out, like I said. So I would almost expect them to launch some major attack. I don't want to see a nuclear thing happen. I don't want to see that happen, right? But it just wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me at all, unless they have some other type of weapon up their sleeve where they wouldn't have to rely on nuclear. Maybe. I don't know. But Iran knows that, it costs a lot of money and manpower to make all these weapons that they get, right? And they're just burning up all this money and manpower, launching all these missiles when 90% of them just get blown up by the Iron Dome. So their money for Iran is just going and decreasing. That's what I'm saying. Their desperation is increasing, right? Nothing's working. They're not going to be victorious. Now because of what they've done, they're going to get attacked even worse. So they're cornered, they're defenseless. Their money's going down. They can't keep creating endless missiles to keep launching in futility. They're going to do what? Pull out something bigger from their back pocket. That's only common sense, right? So I wouldn't be surprised, but God forbid, we do see something nuclear happen. But it's important to think about these things because you don't want to sit here and wake up and have a stroke or heart attack because you see on the news a nuclear war started. Like, the sad reality is a lot of people in the world will probably have a stroke or a heart attack if they see that on the news, especially old people, people with medical conditions. It will panic them because that's something we've always heard about and feared since the dawn of since the dawn of the 1900s. Is something everybody has feared. In the 40s and 50s, all the hoopla about nuclear this, nuclear that, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all these fears that people have had in politics over the years, it'll all come to fruition. And when people see that on the news, it could really do them in. I would definitely get stressed out. Don't get me wrong. I live in fear that if Iran launches weapons of any sort, especially nuclear, over the ocean, then they could be hitting other countries too, including my country might be affected. Um, so it's scary times. I've even considered before, like, what if they do something like that and my country has to be evacuated? And we have to go up to America or Canada or somewhere else for safekeeping. Are they going to be able to get all of us out of my country? I doubt it. It'd be a really crazy scenario. Um, but anyways, right, that's what we're looking at. But the one good thing in all of this is that America and Israel are that effective, and they have their own big guns in their own back pockets, that there's no way they could lose this, right? Iran has inferior intelligence and these higher level capabilities than Israel and America and the rest of the allies do, right? So they don't stand a chance in terms of their technological or intelligence superiority. Like, Iran is inferior to that. So really, at the end of the day, if it does come to Iran and some allies of Iran going against America, Israel, and allies of America and Israel, we already know who the winner is going to be, right? It's going to be America and Israel. It will not be Iran. Like, there's just no way. It's not going to happen. Okay. And there is a ton more high-tech weaponry that, the good forces have that they haven't used as far as we publicly know in battle. Like, tons of weaponry that can be used, lasers, all sorts of energy wave, and even particle energy beams, all sorts of very interesting stuff. And it's not classified, it's declassified, but a lot of people just don't know about this stuff. There's a lot of different weaponry that can be used. And other ones I just want to mention for the sake of not mentioning it. Electromagnetic weaponry. There's all sorts of very interesting things. Railguns. I mean, tons of different things that could be used. There's just no way that. And plus, you also have the alleged UFO program. I mean, they allegedly, America and other good nations have advanced craft, right? So they most likely do have technology, craft, and weaponry that's like 50 or 100 years or more advanced than what the public knows. That's common knowledge. And there's just no way that America and Israel are going to lose to Iran and their buddies. It's just not going to happen. So like I said, the only way out for, and I'm sure Iran knows all that, right? I'm sure even at a low intelligence capability level, they'd be able to recognize that. I'm not an intelligence expert, and I can recognize that. I think anybody with common sense can recognize that their abilities are inferior to America and Israel. So that's why I'm saying the logical scenario here at the end of the road is that Iran, recognizing all this obvious situation, will have to lash out. And the only way they can effectively lash out is just throw sticks and stones, their missiles, if that's all they really have. Or if they do really have something bigger and worse, they're going to pull that out of the back pocket, right? So everybody's going to find out if they did have nuclear or not, because they would probably use nuclear if they had it. So, I mean, you have a religion and a culture that believes in martyrdom and that puts martyrdom on a pedestal. They're happy to go die for their country and their beliefs, for their religion. They're happy to do that. They think they're going to get rewarded in heaven for doing that. That's another major problem. So we're not just talking about a regular nation of regular mindset people who have to factor in things like, oh no, I don't want my nation of people to die. Oh no, this and that there, I want to reduce casualties. No, they're on the polar opposite end of that field because they believe in martyrdom. You know what I mean? They pride themselves religiously in being martyrs. So throw that into the mix as well, right? Anyways, so it'd be interesting and scary to see what further developments happen. Maybe it'll fizzle down again, um, like it did over 2024. Maybe it'll fizzle down and nothing big will happen. But it's just come to the point now with what happened in Gaza with Hamas and with Iran here. They make so many violent threats. Like they say DEATH to Israel. They vowed to destroy Israel. They've promised so many explicitly vile things on record, proudly proclaimed them. They have proclaimed their motive, right? They've made their motive clear 100%. Okay, that is what they want to do. Anyways, let me get going because I gotta go do something else really quick. But take care, folks, and God bless. But keep your eyes peeled and reform from your sins. That's all I could say. We got more reason to believe that it's imminent now than ever before. So take care, folks. So what happens if they do? This might be worth mentioning quickly. Like if they do suddenly attack Jerusalem and God doesn't arrive that night. Doesn't say in Ezekiel exactly how long it takes for the forces of God to arrive. Might be instantaneously. Maybe it'll be a few days, few weeks. We don't know because it doesn't hyper specify. It's implied, or it seems that it's implied that it'll happen right away. Based on the logical fact that God arrives, so to speak, to the messianic forces or whatever, they arrive to stop this attack on Israel and Jerusalem. So I mean, that gives you some idea of a time frame. It's not going to happen way after they attack Jerusalem. It's going to happen while they're attacking Israel and Jerusalem, right? But it may not happen instantaneously, right? So if you hear about that on the news, like if me myself, like if in the next whatever, like day, weeks, whatever, doesn't matter when, but if I turn on the news and I hear, oh, they launched this major type of attack on Jerusalem, I'm going to be sweating in my boots. And all I can say is thank God I've reformed from a lot of my sins as of this moment now. And everybody else better as well. That's all I could say. I'll be ripe and ready at that time inside me thinking, okay, yep, it could happen any given moment. And if they do attack Jerusalem like that, it would have to be big enough to a point where it qualifies. It can't just be some like little tiny event that takes place. Like if they launch something significant at Jerusalem, that's what's going to tip the scales for me and say, yep, it's right at the door. God's got his hand on the doorknob, so to speak, and the door's about to come cracking open, and the forces of Judgment Day are about to come upon us, right? But even when we do see that attack happen on Jerusalem, we're not told like it's going to be minutes, days, weeks, months. We don't know, right? But based on all the prophecies and the numbers and everything that God gives us, it's going to happen this year, 2026, 2027, right? It's going to be in that range there. So definitely. But based on how the world events going right this minute, kind of seems like 2025, right? But like I said, be ready, be waiting, be watching, and reform. That's how you're going to be ready for this event, right? So anyways, take care, folks. God bless. And I hope it all works out for everybody somehow.